So, after the last year of learning this woodworking caper and sharing it with you all, I've been dreaming up the perfect workbench. Now, this workbench started off as something that would have been made entirely out of 2x4s, but has evolved into a Rubo-inspired workbench made entirely from pallet wood. So let me share with you the 4-month journey of making my first workbench that cost $0 in wood and taught me more woodworking lessons than the rest of my life combined. Plus, we can finally get rid of this thing. Let's get into it. Now, to give you a proper understanding of how I got to this point, we need to go back to the beginning. Scrolling through the endless videos on YouTube, looking for that ultimate workbench. Ultimate workbench. That's not a bad title for a video. How's no one ever come up with that? Anyway, I was busy procrastinating and trying to work out what the right bench for me was and the space I work in. So, a list of what I wanted my bench to be started to form. Firstly, I wanted to incorporate the table saw into the bench, as everyone kept telling me how I was going to murder myself using the table saw on the ground. Next, as I'm working in a garage that needs to have cars parked, the bench also needs to be mobile. This would also help me with filming. It also needs to be used for assembly and have multiple clamping options because apparently I need more than 2 arms. Now at this stage I was thinking about heading to the big green shed to get myself some overpriced 2x4s and start building. This was around the same time as Nick from Padula Studio releasing his Rubo workbench video. It was breathtaking. Seriously, if you haven't seen it, go and watch a true artist. But this video inspired me. There was one quote in particular where Nick was talking about how people think his workbench is too nice to use that made me throw away everything I was planning to do.
I believe a great workspace breeds great work. If you're proud of your shop, you'll create pieces that you're proud of.
So, I scrapped everything I had planned and decided to keep it simple. And boy, for a novice woodworker who'd never used a chisel, it turned out to be anything but. I dove in with no plans other than a concept in my head and the following things I wanted it to be. A Rubo-inspired bench with a thick, solid hardwood top. It had to be on wheels so I could move it around the shop. Dog holes to add some clamping options. A sliding dead man. The ability to add a tail vise down the track. And I had to enjoy looking at it. I also decided, mainly because I like a challenge, it was going to be made 100% from pallet wood. I believe a workbench is something every bloke should have. For me, this space has given me a little piece of quiet in a world full of stress and expectations. Now, I believe a good workbench is something that grows with your skill and is the basis for both the enjoyment of your time being a maker, as well as the starting point for the quality of the work you can produce. Now, I'm sure plenty of beautiful pieces are made on workhorses and driveways, so don't get me wrong. But I truly believe a solid workbench makes the process easier and more repeatable. Or, at least that's what I'm hoping for. My current workbench is this, and it's so unstable and flimsy that I've been on the garage floor instead. It was around this point I realised hammering out all these nails was going to be enough to kill my newfound love for pallet wood. So I jumped on Amazon, ordered myself a new air gun, then went and gave my credit card an unhealthy workout on a new air compressor. Gotta love next day delivery. While I was playing with my new toys and getting all the nails out of the pallet wood that was going to become the basis for all my work to come, I found myself in a state of self-doubt. Was I going to be able to make a bench that was really going to be good enough? Solid enough to make furniture I was going to be proud of? Should I really share this on YouTube when I have no idea what I'm doing, and there are already so many amazing woodworkers sharing their talent? Now, this was the first time in the garage I'd started to let my mental health struggles creep in. Until this moment, the garage had been a refuge. In this moment of self-doubt, I realised I didn't really have a plan for how to go about the build. So with no plan, and no real idea of what wood I actually had, I knew I wanted to maximise the material from these pallets. So I decided to make the top first, then, when I knew what size it was, I'd build the legs to suit. I glued the top up in 2 parts, with the idea of running each half through the planer. But for some reason, I decided that this wasn't a workbench build, but rather a journey of discovery and pain. So I opted to glue it all together, with the plan to flatten it as one piece. But I'm getting ahead of myself. The frustration of this seemingly simple choice will become apparent shortly. Part of the reason for this terrible choice was to also give me the chance to do another video on making this super simple router sled, as I honestly believe too many people overcomplicate them. If you're interested, click the video on the top right and chuck it on your watch list. Now, for those of you concerned with OHS, I advise that you skip forward about a minute. At this point, if you look really closely, you can see me slowly coming to terms with my age, and realising that if I try to lift this slab, I was going to break myself. Maybe though, if I just stare at it long enough, it will become lighter, or I'll have some brainwave on how to lift it. How about from this angle? Nope, still too heavy. Well, it's not going to move itself, so nothing for it other than to use a bit of basic physics and some awkward footwork. After making that look incredibly easy and safe, it's time to use my super simple router jig and start to flatten this slab. Those eagle-eyed viewers will probably notice that I'm also not using a flattening bit. Well, you'd be correct, I don't have one. So I'm using the largest straight bit I own. Now, this was my first time using this very budget-friendly router, and as it would turn out, it's cheap for a reason. Spoiler alert, it did try to murder me at one point, with the bit coming loose and gouging into the bench top. At least now it makes it an easy choice for which is the top and which is the bottom side, I guess. Weirdly, after this happened, I then tightened it so much that the plastic locking pin to hold the collet wouldn't hold, so it took me about 2 hours of anger, swearing, and threats to remove the route of it. Moral of the story? You apparently get what you pay for. It was at this stage I realised 2 key things. Firstly, I was never getting all this sawdust out of everything in the garage, and secondly, I was going to need to flatten this top further to get the router lines out. My initial thought went immediately to the romantic notion of using a hand plane to get this done, and it just so happened I happened to know a builder willing to lend me one. Alright, so I'm back. I've got a builder friend who was generous enough to hook me up with actually an amazing hand plane and also sharpen the chisel for us. So let's get back into it. Thanks, Doug. See? Veritas. We got the good stuff. Oh, see? Look how pretty that is. Perfect. While I was summoning up the courage to start hand planing down the top, I figured I may as well pull out the circular saw and square up the edges. While I was enjoying pretending to know how to use hand tools and adjusting the hand plane to get as close to a wood curl as this bumpy pallet wood would give me, I discovered what many of you are probably already facepalming about: grain direction. Alright, I have a confession to make. I am not a hand tool worker. I've never had any experience with it, and yeah, things have gone, look, pretty well. However, a little bit worried about some of the tear out. Some of the tear out that's happening here, I can only assume it's because I've got pieces of wood that the grain alternates on some of them. So some of them I'm going with the grain, some I'm going against. So I've called another friend who's a builder, and he's been kind enough to give me some Festool tools. Anyway, we've got some Festool stuff. We're going to have some fun. I assume I'm never going to be able to go back to poor man tools again. Let's get into it. So Pete's kind donation of Festool sanders and a shop vac meant I could avoid admitting my defeat to Doug while crawling back into my comfort zone and the space of power tools that can hide my inexperience. While I still maintain my unpopular opinion that Festool stuff are not the best looking tools going around, my first time using them definitely made me understand why they command the prices they do. They are just built so well. Now, I totally understand it. When designing these tools, they must allocate 100% of their time to ensuring the tool is as good as it can be, and I can only assume that they look at any time spent on styling as wasted. Now, all that's left to do is put a 45-degree chamfer on the top edge and a roundover on the underside. Then it's time to move on to the legs. As the top weighs a ton, I'm going to go with 4 chunky legs. I found 8 good pieces from my pile of pallet wood, which I'll laminate together to thicken them up. So first up is milling the wood down to be square. I've gone over this process in detail in the video on the top right if you're interested. The rough plan is to have 4 simple legs attached to the top with mortise and tenons and braced by a simple belt around the base. Is belt the right term for it? Yeah, it is now. Anyway, I've never done true joinery before, so I really had to make myself a mallet. There's another video in the top right to add to your watch list while you're hitting that subscribe button. Until now, the most complicated joinery I'd tried was on my first YouTube video, the step stool I made for my son, which turned out pretty well. But my confidence still isn't high, so I figured I'd keep it pretty basic and use the table saw for as much of it as I could. I'm not sure what the correct term for the joint I'm making up is, but I shall call it a mitered lap joint. After taking these out of the clamps, I'm pretty happy with how they've come together. Nice tight joints and plenty of excess glue I can enjoy scraping off. These pieces will form the legs and the frame of our workbench. I'm always so impressed at how good some of the pallet wood looks when you take off its weathered exterior. Even though I've bulked up the legs, I still have a problem. The adjustable feet I've ordered off the internet are quite large and require the legs to be even larger. So I have an idea to adjust them at just the base and thicken them up there. All good in theory. The theory being that your tools are square, that is. Yep, you guessed it. I forgot to double check that my mitre saw was actually cutting at a perfect 90-degree angle. Luckily I noticed before the next glue up, but I still had to recut everything. Thankfully I'm super short, so the legs had a heap of excess length. If I was normal sized, I would have been in trouble. Alright, so I've just finished up work. It's like 40 degrees outside, so the garage door is going to be shut. So I apologise for the lighting, but I've been super busy all week and really want to get into some of this joinery and at least make some progress. Let's get into it. So all the lap joints have come up well, apart from one, that is, that I may have cut a bit loose. But we'll hide that on the back side of the bench so no one will ever notice. Now it's time to cut the tenons and start to stress about future David having to chisel out my first ever mortises. I'd spoken to a few people about doing these mortises, and I'll be honest, I've been a bit scared to do them and ruin my bench top. The sensible response to my concern is to practice doing them on some scrap wood. Now, that sounds like a lot of effort and time that I don't have. I mean, this build's already taken me 4 months, so that's not happening. And I mean, joke's on them. This workbench is all scrap wood anyway. So, for the moment, I can continue to put off doing those and stress about it instead. I've often found myself pondering over the past year if I'm late to discover the joys of woodworking or early. For all you ladies wondering, these pasty white legs are 37 years old. Now, all the woodworkers I've been lucky enough to meet in person seem to be at least my age or older. Yet, Reddit seems to be full of woodworkers that are far more talented than myself, doing amazing things in their 20s and 30s. So, where are all you guys hanging out? And girls. Weirdly, the thing that got me started in woodworking is the fact that I'm a tight ass. Basically, I wanted to build a small deck and barbecue off the side of my house, but was too much of a tight ass to pay someone to actually do it. I managed to build the deck, built-in barbecue and concrete bench, buy all the tools, and end up being able to use better materials than I would have otherwise for less than it cost me to get someone to do it. I'm just disappointed I didn't film it, especially the concrete bench pour, because finding how to do that on the internet was surprisingly difficult. And if I was to do it again after learning from all my mistakes, I'd end up doing it a lot better the second time. From concept to design and problem solving, I loved it. Apart from ruining my shoulder lifting the concrete slab, the process of making brought me some joy. This was also at a time I was struggling a bit mentally. And even though it was just a deck, I found the mixture of work, creativity, and progress almost therapeutic. Now this got me thinking, if someone who's only experienced woodworking is from a class in high school can do it, anyone can. So while I may not be great at instructional videos, I figured sharing my journey, mistakes and all, might help someone else discover how good making things is for your self-worth. And even if it helps just a single person, it's all worth it. So now we've finished cutting the joinery for the legs, it's time to get the vise mounted and a faceplate made up. As I don't have any pieces that are large enough for the faceplate, I'm going to glue 2 together and hope that they're strong enough for the job. I considered putting in some dowels to reinforce it, but I figure if it fails, I'll just make another one. Besides, I keep hearing that glue joints are stronger than the wood itself, so I figure that I'll test out that theory for everyone. I find myself these days wanting a lot of tools. One that's really up there on the list is a drill press. I'm honestly surprised how often I use this poor man's drill press. Speaking of poor man's tools, I have a set of cheap Forstner bits from China, which I've always used until now. Turns out one of the sizes I needed for this build I didn't actually have, so I went and got myself a better one of that particular size. Wow. Honestly, cuts like butter. If you have the money, go get yourself some nice drill bits, and thank me later. So, I got this vise from CarbTech. Not sponsored or anything, with my own dollary dues, so I can be totally honest. At this point, I can't speak for how good it is to use, only that it feels quite well built and super heavy, so it bodes well. I am disappointed, however, that there were no mounting hardware or installation instructions, or any paperwork full stop in the box. I mean, it's not that complicated, but I was expecting some sort of something, I guess. Aside from it being in a plastic bag, inside a box, inside a plastic package, inside another plastic bag, I guess it's probably to save the environment or something? Stop going on rants, David. Anyway, so I'm mounting this vise so the faceplate will reach the edge of the bench and cover the leg to maximise my clamping options. Apart from cutting holes in the faceplate being a little tricky, mainly due to the vise not coming with a template, that was nice and easy. I haven't got a handle for the vise yet, sadly, but I figure I might be able to steal someone's time and lathe at some point to show me how to turn wood and make my own. Now that the top's the right way up, and with the vise attached, I'm finally able to start using it as a workbench. Exciting. The next job that will allow us to continue avoid cutting the mortises is putting the legs together. For this, all we need to do is decide on the length of the frame and cut our stretches down to size with 45-degree mitres. Just like making a giant picture frame, really. How did I decide on how large to make the frame, I hear you ask? Simple. I decided that the length of my longest piece of wood I was using to be about right. Even though I was pretty happy with how the lap joints had come up, I decided I was going to also put screws in each joint as well as glue to really make sure it was sturdy. Possibly overkill, but hey, I prefer to over-engineer it than under. Now, as I didn't want people to see that I'd cheated, I decided to recess the screws and cover my shame with dowels. Because in my mind, if you see I've gone to the effort of using a dowel, you'll assume that I've done a proper job rather than just hiding a screw. Cutting these dowels also meant I could use my newly installed vise for the first time, and it wasn't just me excited about it, the dowels were pretty happy about it as well. All right, so today's the day. I've been putting it off, but we've got to start cutting some holes in this bench top. I'll admit, I'm terrified, and I've been putting it off for quite a while. Yeah, here's to hoping I don't stuff it up. So, we're at the point where I can postpone my fear of cutting these mortises no further. With the rest of the bench fully assembled, the only excuse I have left is sanding. So, let's get back to some more sanding. I'm kidding. Even my fear of doing these mortises doesn't outweigh my hatred of sanding. Alright, so slight change of plan. What I've decided to do is rather than having the tenons go right through the top of the bench top, I'm going to do about 3/4 of the way in. So you won't see them from the top of the bench. That way, if I stuff them up a little bit, we're all good. Obviously, it makes it harder. My original plan was to put some wedges in the top. You can do that with recessed ones, but I'm certainly not good enough. So what we're going to do is put little dowels in from the side. I'll try and offset them a little bit so it actually pulls the joint tight and see how we go. But I think that's probably a safer way to do it. We're going to start off though by drilling out the majority of the rubbish, wood, whatever you want to call it. Anyway, let's go. My plan is to cut out as much of the material as possible using a Forstner bit, then finish it all off using my singular chisel. Literally, part of my decision on how large to make the tenons was based on the size of my chisel. So, let's overcome my fear of ruining this bench by just getting started. Now, while I had the bench top upside down and without any legs to get in the way, I figured I'd cut out the runner for the sliding dead man we still need to make. I'm unsure yet what wood to make it out of, or how big it should be, so it's yet another decision I've been delaying, with the hope seeing the bench assembled will give me some sort of a brainwave. As I'd also changed my mind about the mortises going through the top of the bench, I also needed to cut the tenons down to size. What happened to my pants? Now, I know I said that I would offset the holes for the dowels to pull the leg joints in tight, but it turns out I lied. Changed plans. After seeing how well the mortises and tenons came out, I don't think it even really needs the dowels at all, so offsetting them's just going to be overkill, but I figure it's better to have them just to be safe. After all the stress and anxiety, mortises are actually pretty easy. Even with limited tools and zero experience, taking my time and making small adjustments, they've come out near perfect. What's with these slightly dirty white gloves? Weird. Once we attach the wheels, the bench will finally be, well, a bench. This long 4-month journey has its end in sight. As my biggest project to date, it's truly been a learning experience, full of challenges and mistakes. Going into this build, I wasn't fully sure what to expect, mostly in part to not having any plans to work off. But at this point, I realised why I had enjoyed making this piece so much. It was a true reflection of my skill and who I am as a maker. Sure, a store-bought bench from Timbercon might be nicer, but it wouldn't have that little bit of me in it. Now I understand why every woodworker should make their own bench. As usual, I'm getting ahead of myself. there's still a couple of jobs left to do, and one major lesson. So, time to wet it down, give it one final sand, and it's ready for some tung oil, and start planning that sliding dead man. I've intentionally left doing the sliding dead man until the very end. My initial thoughts were just to laminate together a couple of pieces of wood for this and call it a day. But I want it to be a feature that draws a little bit more attention. So I've decided to use one of our pallet slabs from a previous video that I was actually saving for another furniture build. To thicken it up enough, I cut it down the guts and then glued it together. There's a lot of cutting wood, so you can just glue it back together in this woodworking game. While that's drying, we'll make the bottom rail that the dead man will slide along. This is probably the wrong way to do it, but it worked pretty well for me. Basically, I set the table saw at a 45-degree angle, lowered the blade so it would only go halfway through the board, and sent it through twice to get my runner. The benefit to this method is I can then cut the exact same angle on the bottom of our dead man without changing the saw setup. I'm going to attach the runner with recessed screws. I probably could have just glued and clamped it, but I want to be able to remove the runner if I need to in the future. Why, I hear you ask? Well, this will be my method for removing the dead man. Rather than having the top rabbet cut so it can lift up and out, I'll make it so it runs tight with the top of the underside of the bench, for no other reason than I believe it looks better. This cut, I slowly just snuck up on my final dimension. I'm probably too slow to ever do this as a job, but I figure it's better to take your time and overthink a few things than have to redo it. Cutting this rabbet in the top of the dead man was a fair bit more finicky than I first imagined. I didn't want to cut too much out as I wanted it to sit firmly in the channel without any play to ensure it was going to be solid, while still being loose enough to slide smoothly. It did give me a chance to test out my shiny new tenon saw though. Not sure my skills are deserving of it as yet. When deciding how many dog holes to cut, I went with the theory it's better to have too many and not need them than not enough. So, I went with 3 rows offset at an angle of about 30 degrees using the speed square. This will be the opposite to how I treat the bench top. As I'm scared to ruin the top and make it look like a dog's breakfast, to begin with at least, I'll only be putting in a couple of dog holes near the vise to use. I'll then add others as I need them. Seriously, how does using a 45-degree chamfer bit on a router make everything look like it was done by a pro? Speaking of looking like it was done by a pro, yeah, nothing to see here. No one to look at the back, surely. So what happened there is what most people would call inexperience. Using the Forster bit caused significant blowout in the backside. I've worked out since cutting all the holes for this build that a sacrificial piece of wood on the underside will help reduce any blowout. Handy hot tip there for anyone who's new to this as myself. The last small addition I'll do is to add a pop-up dog to the face vise. It's as simple as using one of those cheap push-to-open kitchen cabinet things and drilling that into the dowel. Eventually, I'll build in some proper storage for this workbench, but for the moment, a simple base will be enough. So, the journey of discovery this workbench build has taken me on has shown me that my newfound love for woodworking is not a summer crush. I now find myself at work thinking about the long list of projects I want to get home to get started on, planning not just how to do what is next, but things I likely won't even get to this year. This is a passion that I'll enjoy building on for the rest of my life, and I look forward to sharing the journey with you all. It also helped answer my earlier question of if I was early or late to discover woodworking. I think for me, it's come at the perfect time. It has given me a creative outlet, a little piece of calm progress and self-improvement. It's also introduced me to a group of woodworkers and makers that are unbelievably supportive. So thank you.